Happy Monday and welcome back to another exciting week of the Rocketeer Minute, where each and every day, Monday through Friday, we go over 1 minute of the greatest adventure movie Walt Disney's ever made, the 1991 Joe Johnston-directed feature, The Rocketeer. I'm one of your hosts, Jim O'Kane of TVDads.com.
And I'm Hal Bryan, an airplane nerd from the Experimental Aircraft Association here in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. And speaking of the Experimental Aircraft Association, Jim, I brought a colleague with me today.
Awesome.
So joining us, a very special guest, good friend of mine, coworker who works remotely a lot of the time, but he's in town this week and will be a lot more as we get closer to our big show here in Oshkosh in July. This is Dennis Dunbar. Dennis is the director of AirVenture Airshow Operations and also the principal behind Dunbar Air Shows all around the country. Dennis, welcome.
Thanks, Hal. Thanks, Jim. This is an honor to be here. This is going to be a lot of fun. I've listened to some of the earlier ones, and they've blown my mind, and what a cool movie we get to talk about.
Yeah, no kidding.
It's great. I mean, a lot of air show stuff. And I got to ask first, have you ever flown a biplane wearing a clown suit?
Not wearing a clown suit. I could answer that one pretty quick.
Yeah. Although I think it depends on your interpretation of clown suit. I mean, really, I've seen Dennis in a lot of makeup. I've seen him, in a funny wig. Okay, none of that is true.
Not to say it hasn't happened. I don't know.
Fair enough.
Well, this is coming up in the middle of a lot of problems. I mean, poor old Malcolm, who hasn't been behind a stick in 20 years, is trying to figure out how to, I guess, work a stick again. Much to the dismay of Peavy and the always late, or the late this time, Cliff Secord. And Cliff comes up with a remarkable idea of how to solve the problem by going out and try on their untested, or the one-time tested, but not with a human being, rocket pack. Whether that is a good idea or not is accompanied by timpani, so I guess that was a good idea. I guess that was a good idea.
It's always a good idea when there's a timpani involved. And you notice, before we dive in too deep, right at the very start of this minute, you see both of Malcolm's hands on the stick there, and you see the airspeed indicator, and it's got a red mark at 120 miles per hour, which we've talked about before. The colored markings wouldn't really be that common, if really at all, in the late 30s. A little bit of anachronism. It's also interesting to me to see that I'm not sure at this point, and again, recording out of sequence, we may have already covered a little bit of this, but the standard J1, so that's the 1916 biplane that's starring as Miss Mabel in these sequences. Top speed on that airplane is just a hair over 70 miles an hour, about 72 miles per hour. So very interesting to me to see a red line at 120. Now, it's possible this could be the J1 cockpit and that this particular restored one, bigger engine, et cetera, but that's a pretty big jump in top speeds. So I'm inclined to think this is just a mock-up cockpit. And again, if we have discovered this and figured this out on a previous minute already, then just pretend this whole sentence never happened.
I was just wondering, would it be possible, since this is kind of like a spare parts plane that they've had lying in the hangar, just to have an airspeed indicator in there? Could they have grabbed it off of another machine and dropped it in and said,
Sure.
Okay, this will do? Yeah,
absolutely. Although it does, it's interesting that I believe actually we would have discussed this last Friday in minute 40, but we do see the airspeed indicator fluctuating quite a bit. I think even faster than we're seeing it right here. But anyway, not a big deal. The important thing is we know Malcolm's in trouble. We hear the engine running rough. The smoke is on. All that good stuff.
I have a question with the when we first talked about the GB, when Cliff is trying to gain control of it, as after it's been shot up and stuff, and he's trying to figure out which way how far the controls go. He was kind of waving it all around, and that would have probably put him in the bean field.
Right.
Am I correct in assuming that the standard J1 has a lot more play in the steering, as it were, when you're whipping the stick around?
So I've not flown this particular type, but my experience in similar types, and Dennis, you may have flown something closer than I have. My closest would probably be the Moth series, which is smaller and lighter. But it is a big, heavy airplane, and there's a lot of drag. And when you're putting it into a bank left or right, there's a lot of structure to move. So I would anticipate, there'd be a fair amount of play in the stick, and it to be for a sort of a delicate, fragile-looking biplane, actually for it to feel pretty heavy.
does he also not have to keep his feet on the rudders?
Yeah, his feet are pretty well tucked back, and apparently clown shoes and rudder pedals don't mix.
That's
Yeah,
what I was gonna say too. I've never flown a Jenny, but I would imagine that airplane has a lot of adverse yaw, and you're definitely
sure.
gonna want to have those feet on the rudder pedals.
Yeah, this would be the standard J1 here, just like the Jenny, is going to be very much a rudder first airplane. Even when it comes time to turn, when you're flying it, when you're not sort of a rummy in a clown suit like we've got going on here. When you're trying to fly it normally, you kind of lead with rudder into and out of the turns, and you wouldn't get very far with just flying with your feet flat on the floor. But Malcolm's not really supposed to be doing a good job, so we can't pick on that too much for this.
Well, Malcolm's not current, and that's one of
Yeah.
the things we have these days with all the rules that, what I love about this movie is it really does show a time where there was no regulation in the air race industry, and the now obviously this is Hollywood, but you can see why these rules have evolved. Everything from pilot currency to the 1938 Santa Ana air show disaster, all those things. So.
Could we talk about that a little? Because I do not know about the 1938 Santa Ana air show disaster.
I don't know all the details, but back in 1938 in, I think it was Bogota, Colombia, it was a Curtis Hawk, if I remember right. They were doing an air show there, and there was a presidential grandstand and some other grandstand full of VIPs, and the pilot, I can't remember the pilot's name, tried to fly between the grandstands and ended up clipping them both and ultimately killed like 50 people, lots wounded, obviously things that don't even come close to happening today. But actually back then, there were a lot of spectator fatalities at air shows, and something that our industry is very proud of. In over 60 years, we have not had a spectator fatality at an air show in North America in over 60 years. We're really kind of the envy of the motorsports industry for that record, for that matter. But certainly that can't be said for going back in time here, like this movie takes us.
Yeah, I mean, there's stuff. Just watching the scene where the poor Malcolm is flying into the middle of the air race and coming at them at 180 degrees off phase. Just wondering how some of that filming. I'm assuming that the standard in the foreground is probably mounted on a pole, and the other guys are just kind of flying around it. But.
There was a couple of things I was wondering about. If you look at let's see here. I'm sorry, I'm scrubbing through the minute while we talk. As I know from a little bit of extra research I've done, and again, for those listening, at the time we're recording this, we've been talking with a guy named Craig Hosking, the aerial coordinator on the film, and we've been struggling schedule-wise to get him on the show with us. So you may have heard him already, or we may never have him on the show. We'll see what happens, but forgive the possible out of sync confusion. But anyway, I do know from reading an earlier interview with him that right about sort of second 12 or so, when we're behind the standard, we're behind Miss Mabel, and then we see the four airplanes coming at us and at him, and they're all breaking off. That's actually really done. That's Craig is in the Bell 206 helicopter. They're obviously zoomed in pretty tight to compress the distance. You can also, I've never noticed this before, in second 12, you can look and you can see a modern day, like a Ford Ranger pickup or something parked on the ground down there. But hey, they've got those four airplanes coming at us again, that Ryan STA, the Travel Air Mystery Ship replica, the Great Lakes, and the Brown B-2 Miss Los Angeles. But that shot from behind the airplane, Hosking talks about particular. I just put the helicopter right in the smoke, right behind Chuck Wentworth flying the standard. So that one I know is real. The one I wonder about is right after that, right about second 14, where we're looking up at the standard. The way the camera hits tracked so perfectly with the standard, the Miss Mabel, that it really almost looks to me like it's not actually moving. Like, So that one I wonder if it was on a rig, but then you've got Miss Los Angeles coming between the camera and the airplane.
Yeah.
So
and that could be a model Miss Los Angeles, and then the other three craft in the background are real things that are flying.
Right.
The eye is looking through a two-dimensional image, and we have a tendency of believing what our eyes are telling us. So That's how special effects works.
Exactly.
It's easy to fool.
Yeah, regardless, it's well done. If we're sitting here scribing back and forth as we do every time and saying, well, we're not sure how real that particular segment is or exactly how they did it, then they win. They achieved what they set out to achieve.
Yeah, and that particular angle is very reminiscent of the the biplane that's on top of Wings of Honor. The
exactly.
near permanent display at the end of the beam
Right.
field there for Neville's movie.
So, and then of course, right after that whole sequence, so Dennis, we've got this. This isn't an air show at this point. This is more the racing segment, but you would expect. We're expecting the clown act, so we're going to have an air show between races. But now we've got an incident. We've got an incursion of some kind here.
Before we get into the incursion, I should probably clarify something because I'm sure there's somebody really smart out there watching this going, he said we haven't had a spectator fatality in over 60 years. I did, and that was at an air show. And I want to point out that the regulations between air shows and air races are different. So the Reno accident, obviously that was under a different set of rules. So for those smart folks in the crowd wondering what I missed there, that's a little difference in the rules. So
it's an important distinction to make.
Yeah.
I have never noticed until I watched this minute that there is a twin motor that I don't think we've ever talked about before. It's parked in the back as Clifford's running toward the Bigelow hangar, just to the right.
Yeah, I'm sure we've called that out maybe once, but would have been very briefly in passing when I'm sort of nerding out, saying, "Oh, there's one of these and one of those and one of these and one of those." So that's a Lockheed Electra. I believe it's an Electra Junior. It's hard to tell from the brief glimpse whether this is the 10 or the 12. Anyway, sort of either the same type or a variation of the type that Amelia Earhart would have been famous for getting lost in about a year prior to this film taking place.
Oh, it's a stunning looking bird right there at the end.
Yeah, they are just beautiful. We had a gathering of them here at Oshkosh. Was that the year before last?
I think that was 2015. I think
15.
That beautiful.
Sounds right. I think we had 8 of them here or something, some ridiculous number. It was breathtaking to see that many. It was, in fact, I think it was actually all of them that are flying showed up here.
I made sure my morning drive into the Air Ops building always took me by those airplanes every day. That was just beautiful. It was one of those only in Oshkosh moments.
Sorry to interrupt here, but I have to let you know that at this point in the recording, I had a massive power failure here thanks to a Texas-sized thunderstorm here in Texas. So we were unable to finish recording this particular episode with Dennis. But don't worry, you haven't been cut short. We are going to have Dennis on for a full episode tomorrow, actually kind of an extended episode, where we're going to talk about the history, the current, and future of air shows. So please join us here tomorrow on the Rocketeer Minute. In the meantime, you're always welcome to talk to us on social media. We have many different outlets. You can go to us on Twitter at Rocketeer Minute. You can find us on Facebook, facebook.com/Rocketeer Minute. And of course, the great big site, RocketeerMinute.com, where you can catch up on previous episodes and you can pick up some cool swag from Amazon. It's always available out there. Please also, if you haven't subscribed yet, you still got a chance to do that. Go out to iTunes or to Google Play, search for Rocketeer Minute and click the subscribe button when we show up on your screen. If you could leave us a good review on those platforms, that always helps us out by letting more people know how much you enjoy the show and how much they might enjoy the show. So please do that. But join us back here tomorrow, Tuesday, and we will get back with Dennis and talk a whole lot more about air shows and a bunch of other things on the Rocketeer Minute. So until next time, thanks, and over and out.
Go get him, kid.